All right, so hello everyone and welcome along to our HDR workshop on writing up your thesis. My name is Kerry and we've got a lot to do, so I'm going to get started right now. So just to begin, QUT acknowledges the Turrbal and Yagara as the First Nations owners of the lands where QUT now stands. We pay respect to their elders' laws, customs, and creation spirits. We recognise these lands have always been places of teaching, research and learning, and QUT acknowledges the important role Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play within the QUT community. Okay, so today's resources, I've already got the slides actually up on Blackboard. So I'm just going to pop the link into the chat. Okay, and as I said, I'll put the recording up later today. This is a workshop, and so in the workshops, remember, we provide an overview of theory and principles. In this case, the writing practice is writing up your thesis, of course, and we have the peer discussion, and in the writing circles, we have exemplars and practical activities. We do have some activities in the workshops too, but many more in the writing circles. So try to come along to a combination of both if you can. Goals for today. So we're looking at how you're going to connect your thesis chapters. We're looking at how you're going to demonstrate your contribution to your research field in your thesis. And we also look at examiners and what their expectations will be. And we do have a lot to do. You can see they're pretty full, hoping to get to your peer discussion quite soon. And then we're dividing up into those learning goals there. And we will have time for a final Q&A at the end. You know, there's quite a few slides, but a lot of the slides are just giving you a bit of information. So we get through those quite quickly. And I will keep an eye on the time, of course, as well. So welcome along, everyone, for those of you who are just arriving. And let's get on to our first activity is to start you thinking. All right, so I do this because, you know, I want you guys to be active and not just listening to me, thinking, jotting down notes as well. So please just think about some key elements that you think the examiners will be looking for in your thesis. We'll revisit this question and we'll actually look at the answers, but it would be good for you to have a think about it. And because I really want at this point of writing up your thesis, I want you to be thinking about the examiners as being your readers, okay? So see if you can jot down a couple of things that you think they'll be looking for, and we'll revisit this in a little bit. Now, did everybody open the UniHub event reminder email for today's session that had the activity sheet in it? Anyone not get that activity sheet? Do you need me to upload it now? There are two activities in the sheet that you would have seen if you have opened it up already. They're for your own use. You don't need to share those activities, and I'll explain them as we get to them. Now, the idea is that you're working on these throughout, okay, and after the session as well, right? So don't sort of say later on, oh, I didn't have time in the session. It is hard for me to give you half an hour to complete an activity. All right, I only give you 5 minutes and then you can keep on doing it as you go. Yep, I can share the activity sheet, no problems. Let me pop it in. Okay, I've just popped it into the chat. So just remember to open up those UniHub event reminder emails, because we often attach activity sheets or we give you information about what to expect in the session and how to prepare. So make sure you open those up. And as I said, these are to work on as we go through. I do give you a little bit of time, but not much. And you can always go back and keep working on them later. All right, so what we're going to begin is with a reflection, which is that first activity. You can see that I've got it on the screen there. And you can open up that activity. And as we're going, start your reflecting and start thinking about the strategy. So what I wanted to do is just, well, I'll give you a few minutes shortly, but before we get to that, when I'm saying reflecting, reflect where you're at right now. And so one of the ways to do that is think about at the start of your candidature, you were a novice researcher, potentially. Maybe you've done some research projects before, but if you're doing a PhD, you wouldn't have done a PhD before. So think about the skills you've developed during your candidature, which would have been quite a lot. And then think about if there's any skills you need to develop further. And I really want you to think about too, this is such an important time to stay connected and nurture that sense of well-being instead of thinking, okay, I need to write, and I just need to bunker down in my house. Try not to do that too much. Try to connect with your peers, with your supervisors, and a range of different people. And as we're going through, think about the writing strategies you're already using. Think about your productivity and the things that you can potentially do to problem solve any barriers to productivity. And, one of the challenges with this PhD or an MPhil as well is their training degrees, right? And so your writing is how you will complete that degree. So really think about the writing that you're doing and how you might need to potentially improve it during this period of writing up. So here's an example. This is me. Where I was at when I was sort of 6 months, 9 months out from submission. You can see there, yours will be different to this, but just to give you an example, I wasn't good at using EndNotes still, even though I'd done 2 sessions. Supervisor feedback wasn't as good as I hoped it would be. Still wasn't sure about how to present my findings exactly. Formatting the tables, so not good at IT. Needed to update my lit review, and my boss wanted me to teach more, right? And I was it was hard because I knew I needed to be focusing on my writing as well as having to earn money. Okay, so then you can see there some of my strategies of what I was going to do. So we'll revisit this a little bit later, but just to give you an idea, as I said, yours will be completely different, but there will be some knowledge gaps and some obstacles. So be honest, reflect, and think about those. I'll give you some time shortly. I just want to show you here, anything you need to improve, it could be to do with the structure of your thesis. Maybe it's formatting, maybe your time management, maybe you've got a lot of commitments outside of your study. So think about these things, reflect honestly. And also, as part of this exercise, you may want to get in contact next time you talk to your supervisors and ask them what they think are your biggest aspects that you need to sort of really work on during this time. So I am going to give you a quick 5 minutes right now. So I can stop talking and you can be thinking and try to just jot down a few things. That worksheet, it's a Word document. Fiddle with it, change it, do whatever you want. It doesn't have to stay like that. This is purely for your own thinking and to help you be thinking as we go through the session. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes. Okay, so hopefully you had a little bit of time there to think, and reflecting helps us make changes to things that we need to change or to improve the way we're doing something, our practices, our writing, the time that you're scheduling. And also by thinking and reflecting, also think about why you're here. You probably decided to come to this workshop because there was something specific that you wanted to know, or maybe you thought, I need to know a lot of things. And as I said, be honest with yourself, and maybe your reflection will be everything's going great, and there's really no changes that I need to implement. And if that's the case, then that's fantastic. Okay, so some themes to consider as you're progressing through this period, and themes that will be sort of reoccurring throughout the session. Let's have a quick look. So staying motivated and building your confidence, taking control, seeking feedback, and being informed. So we'll have these themes through the session and just keep those in mind as well. So staying motivated and building your confidence, be proud of how far you've come and all the achievements that you've had so far. And this completion of the degree will be a great achievement. It recognizes all of your hard work. So if you can stay motivated and be determined, then everything will go along as you want it to. And as I said, reflecting is a really important part of that, and improving your skills will lead to that progress and increase your confidence as well. So thinking about your current motivation and confidence, are you still feeling good? Are you thinking your findings are where you need them to be? You're going to have that significant contribution. So hopefully you are well on track and feeling good. If sometimes you're losing that motivation or not feeling confident, think about the strategies to change that and turn that around. This is the final stretch. You're nearly there. You've done an awesome job. And one way we can think about that to stay, on track is think about what inspired you to conduct this research in the first place. Try to get that excitement back if you've lost it a little bit. Hopefully you haven't. And, if you can, write in the chat right now, why did you decide to do a research degree in the first place? Keep that in your mind as you're, when you are having days when you're not feeling quite as good as you were at the beginning. I remember how excited I was when I first started, and there are times when you lose that a little bit. So for me, why did I do a research degree in the first place? I did a master's dissertation, being a teacher at university as my sort of second career, and I did my master's and I loved it. It was great. And the examiner reports were really good as well. So the next step was PhD, working in the university already. And also I was really passionate to know about students' experiences and investigate that, and made my classroom teaching better as well. So anyone else want to share in the chat, that would be fabulous. You might help to motivate other people. But yeah, always keep in mind, what were the reasons initially, and keep those there in your mind as you progress through this time. Doesn't look like anybody wants to share. Anyway. Maybe you will as we go through. So it can be a roller coaster ride. There's a lot to do. You're finalizing everything, working out your conclusions. There's a lot of revision of all the drafts. You need that coherent document. Am I doing this right? Am I going to find something? It is possible to keep that stress manageable. You can have an achievable writing plan. Keep an eye on your physical and mental well-being. Take a day off. Sometimes you think, but I can't take a day off. I'm so busy. I have so much to do. But have that day off. You'll come back refreshed. If you're struggling, tell your supervisors. They're there to help. Get in contact with me. Maybe I can help in some way. Lots of commitments outside your studies. Is there a way to minimize those for a short period of time? Again, if you want to write in the chat any tips that you can have about minimizing stress during this last sort of 6 to 12 months that you're potentially in right now. For me, I know it was like Groundhog Day. Every day I got up and I had to work and I had to study, had the kids. It just felt like I was in slow motion and nothing was happening. And so I got a mantra every morning. I'm one person. I can only do what I can do. I'll do my best. Tomorrow's another day. And that actually helped. It might sound silly, but it did really help. And also I made time for my kids, made sure that they had my 100% attention, because that was the biggest thing that I felt bad about when I was studying all the time. So, regardless of your situation, take time for yourself to have that time out. So let me see. Someone is putting things in the chat. I love it. Someone said about their passion, confirm whether I wanted to pursue research as a long-term career option and explore my strengths, weaknesses in the field of academia. Nice. Someone else believed I could bring about change to tackle child sexual abuse. Okay, that's huge and that's amazing. Fantastic. That is something to keep motivated. Absolutely. I decided to do the research degree hoping for a better career change. Yep, Perfect. Research is cool. Contributing new knowledge is exciting. Awesome. Keep that excitement going. I want to understand children better to minimize stress and take a break from my writing. That's a good strategy. Yes, take a break. It's okay. Go on long walk, someone else. And then another person about their motivation is hoping to learn more skills to improve my career. All beautiful reasons, perfect reasons. Keep those in your mind when you have those days where you think you weren't as productive as you thought you would be, and you might be wanting to throw your hands up in the air and say, I don't know what I'm doing. You do know what you're doing. It's just a very stressful time, but you can manage that stress. Okay. So how do you manage the stress? One way, take control of the writing process. Don't let it control you. Don't let it get into your mind. You are in control here. The writing process hasn't changed during your degree. Read, write, think, seek feedback, revise. You need those messy drafts. You're going to have them, and that's okay. And then you polish those up. You need those as your starting point. Remember, time is finite. You won't get the time back, but plan regular writing sessions, and if you can, every day. Schedule specific time for your proofreading. Proofreading is not writing. Separate the two out. Try writing sprints. Try free writing, just writing whatever comes to your head. We've got a writer's block workshop coming up about writing sprints and the pedagogy behind them, and free writing as well. I'll tell you about that in a minute. Be mindful. Things take longer than you expect, right? That's always going to happen. And persevere. Writing and thinking go together. That thinking time is not wasted, but put your thoughts into your writing. The answers will come. They really will. You've got the passion. You've got the knowledge. You've got the expertise. It will all come. Someone has said in the chat, constantly managing stress levels is challenging and it's testing my patience. Yeah, it is. But this is, you know, a time that will end. You will graduate, right? And yes, it's hard now, but think of how proud and happy you're going to be shortly. Keep that in your mind. Right, theme number 3, seek feedback regularly and widely. Again, like I said, I know the temptation is to just huddle in your room with your laptop or your computer and just write and write and write and don't talk to anybody. Can't waste my time. I've got to spend every waking minute on this thesis. Not quite like that. If you can talk to other people, talk to your supervisors, seek feedback, it will be beneficial in the end, I promise you. Even if the feedback isn't what you hoped it would be and it's negative, hopefully it's constructive, and it should be from your supervisors. That's okay. It's all going to improve, right? It's normal for people to say, I don't quite get what you mean here. And that's all right. We need to get that all ironed out before you get to the examiners. You have shared goals with your supervisory team. They want you to complete, you want to complete. So work together. Try not to avoid them. Seek feedback from other people as well, not just your supervisors. Try to get a network of readers if you can. And also keep in your mind that your supervisors will need time to read that whole draft. Okay, so factor that into your planning as well. Get a reading buddy, win-win situation there. Someone else has said in the chat they found it useful to look at other people's thesis in ePrints. Perfect, because that's actually on one of my slides very shortly. Okay, let's go. All right, so number 4. Be informed. There's a whole stack of information on HiQ. Use it to your advantage. So in this slide here, you can see that's the HDR research pages. Now, your candidature, I've highlighted that because that's where all the information is about submitting your thesis and writing your thesis. Training and workshops circled, that's where you find all the training and workshops. Engage with industry is all about connecting with industry, internships, and then, of course, plan your career. We have a fabulous careers educator. You're getting to that stage now where you can start thinking about your next step. Karen Carvu is our careers educator. She has a stack of fabulous workshops and sessions to help you with your career planning. So utilize those resources as much as you can. Here's the next page from that, your candidature, then your thesis. There's a whole stack of information. We're going to look at some of it, but if you haven't already gone in here, I recommend you do. I've just popped the link into the chat. All right, so stay informed. What about QUT's thesis requirements? Are you aware of those? There's a lot to think about here, but this is what you're aiming for. We will revisit these a little later in the session. I'm just going to pop that link into the chat there for you too. Okay, so here's the list of your thesis requirements. I don't want to, you to be worried about this. You'll be able to achieve these things. You just need to know that you need to achieve them. Right, original and or significant contribution. You know that already. The methodology needs to be effective and appropriate. Yep, we know that. Needs to reflect competence in the survey of the literature. Yep, of course, you know that. There needs to be of required standard for external examination. There's our theme and the idea about the quality of the thesis. As was said in the chat, look at other people's thesis on QUT e-prints, and your supervisors will be able to guide you in where that quality needs to be. And of course, come to the writing sessions as well. Next one needs to be well written, relevant writing conventions and style guidelines. Your style guidelines means your referencing style, right? Spelling, grammar, punctuation, choice of language are of high standard. Yep, we all understand that. Citations, bibliography comply with relevant conventions, and typing errors are corrected. So realistically, we knew all of this, right? But it's good to just have that reminder. Now, I've got another activity there. Write in your notes or the chat, but in your reflection, are there any of these requirements that we've just looked at that you think you already have? And is there any that you think you might need to improve? So let's just jump back to the first one. So your contribution, methodology, your lit review needs to be to the quality standard. So nothing new really, is there? But just to jog your thoughts and have a think, is there anything of these points that you think are, okay, this is something I need to work on a little bit to get where it needs to be? And just pop that into your reflection. Maybe you need to go and double check that you've adhered to your referencing style. Maybe your lit review needs a bit more strengthening. All right, let's keep going. You've got the link there. You can always go back in and check these. Now, this is the examination process. You might already be aware of this, but if not, once again, it's really good to be informed, okay? So there's the link there about the thesis examination. So of course, if this is for the PhD, so you do your final seminar, you'll get good feedback there, you're going to lodge, you'll get the examiner reports, and then you submit the final thesis. Okay, so again, nothing really new, but just good to have in your mind, about the time frames and the expectations. Thesis repository, use it. Yes, very good idea. You can see there, choose the thesis format that fits what you're doing. Makes sense, doesn't it? Okay. All right, so we've talked about the key themes. We've, we started our reflection. Right, time for your peer discussion. So make the most of this opportunity to chat with your peers. So before we get into our breakout rooms, let's give my little spiel about why this is good for you. Active learning, you'll increase your attention and understanding. It helps your critical thinking, develops your evaluative judgment, so you can see, oh, I'm not the only one that has these feelings. Oh, I'm not the only one facing these obstacles. And it might give you some new ideas. And as I keep saying, you know, in these sessions, rather than you sitting there and being passive, we want you to be active. And it's always good to check in with your peers and just have a chat, and it'll make you feel good and feel that you're not alone. That sense of belonging is so important, and COVID has really changed that in a lot of way, where a lot of us are not, you know, maybe some of you can go days without seeing anybody, you know, so try to get out there, and this is a really good opportunity. All right, so are you convinced? I hope so. Righto, here's our questions in the discussion. I always give a couple of questions just to help you find your way. Obviously, if you start talking about other things, you know, that's not going to be the end of the world. I've popped them into the chat. Now, when you go in your breakouts, you won't have this chat anymore, so you might want to jot it down. But one of the questions was the question I asked you at the start. What key elements do you think examiners will be looking for? So have a little discussion about what each of you have thought of. And the other one as well, discuss which chapter you're finding the hardest to write and how you're addressing those challenges. That'll be something interesting. Many of you will have different experiences with that. So that's always a good thing to chat about. And of course, that's going to lead into our next part of the session about connecting your thesis chapters. But before we pop in, I wanted to just do a really quick poll. So I'm just going to pop in the poll. You should be able to see it right now. Now, it's anonymous. No one can know who said what, but this will sort of jog and get you started in your discussion to see what everybody says. What's your guesses? What do you think will be the one that most people will say is the most challenging? There's just a couple more of you to pop your answers in, and then I'll show you the results. It's pretty even, to be honest, at this stage. Right, okay. All right, can you see the results there? Look, it's pretty even. Discussion is actually the biggest one. Interesting, isn't it? No one said other. All right, so bear that in mind. It was pretty even throughout, wasn't it? So your discussion will be interesting. Everyone probably have a different answer for that question. All right. Okay, I am going to pop you guys into your breakout rooms. Just 1 second. Yep. Okay. So pop in there, say your name, what you're doing. You got those two questions to talk about. I am going to give you almost 15 minutes. I like you to have a good opportunity for everybody to chat. I can already see people dropping off because they don't like going into this peer discussion. It really, don't be worried by it. Everybody's supportive and kind. If you haven't got much to say, just say, I don't have much to say, but I like to listen, right? This shouldn't be a worrying thing. Okay. Breakout rooms. All right. Off you go. I will see you back, let's say about 12 minutes or so. Awesome. All right, so let's have a look at your thesis chapters. And as we go through, remember to keep filling in your reflection document. So let's have a look at some key strategies to help with you to get those connected chapters. So we're going to look at writing the complete whole. The thesis does need to be a complete whole with a common thread. You're telling your research story, the narrative. You need to look at the big picture, which is the thesis as the whole. Keep the reader in the loop. Make sure that everything that needs to be in each chapter is in there. And of course, keep seeking feedback. So as I said, keep adding to your reflection document if you need to as you go along. Poll question 2. Very quickly, I would be interested to know this question, the type of thesis that everybody is writing. You can see the question there. Great. Most of you have put an answer in. So most are by monograph and a few by publication. Okay, great. Thank you. Right. So no matter which one you're doing, whether it's by publication or by monograph, everything we talk about now would still apply, most things, okay? When you're doing by publication, you still have to submit a thesis, right? So just be aware of everything that we're talking about and just think about what applies to you and what may not. So the complete whole and the common thread. So as I said, by publication, by monograph, we still need a thesis that is a whole document with a narrative from beginning to end. And you need that common thread all the way through. As I talk about in a lot of my sessions, is the common thread of those key aspects. Why is your study important? What is valuable? What is significant? What's the problem, aims, and gaps? So everything you talk about in your thesis should link back to one of those things, okay? This is a really good quote. The well-structured thesis or dissertation argues a well-substantiated case throughout and gives a sense of the coherence of the whole conceptual framework in action, each paragraph and chapter indicating where the argument is going and where it has been. It interweaves the themes and underpinning concepts, theories, and questions throughout. It takes the reader on a journey of discovery, okay, that the discovery of your fabulous research that you're doing. Really good quote. So this brings us to our second, well, activity 5 now, the writing audit. Now that is in your activity sheet. Again, similar to the reflection activity, this is something to keep doing as we go through the session and after the session as well. Complete it as much as you want, change the columns, change the subheadings, do whatever you need for it to suit what your needs are. It's a resource that I've adapted from Think Well. And as I said, adapt it more if you want to. I'm just going to pop into the chat where I've got this resource from Think Well. They have a real whole stack of free resources actually that can help you schedule and stay on track. I use this as well, or I mention it in our writer's block workshop. So do whatever you want with it that will help you as you're writing up. Now, I am going to give you 5 minutes again to have a look at this, but before I do that, I just want to quickly explain about the fact that I've got a column in there about how many words. It just helps with your planning. You know, I talk about this a lot, this idea of figuring out how many words or pages you need for your chapters approximately. If you're aiming for 80,000 words or even 100,000 words, not every chapter will be as long, right? Usually the introduction and conclusion will be shorter and the other chapters will be longer. If you're doing a thesis by publication, of course, you also need to connect in your publications and explain how they connect. There it's saying PhD candidates will need to decide how best to incorporate the publications into the thesis to ensure there is a cohesive narrative. Go to ePrints and look at how other people that did a thesis by publication, look at what they're doing as well. All right, so I do want to give you a few minutes just to pop down some points here. You'd have an idea of your percentage completed of each of these. And as I said, maybe you want to rejig that whole Word document. Up to you. Okay, so as I said, keep working on this as we progress through and we look at each of the chapters. And remember, in this part of the workshop, we're looking at your thesis chapters and connecting them. And that first key strategy that we looked at was having that complete whole and a common thread. So that's why I've added in the common thread column in that document or that table. So your common thread, as I said, your aims, research questions, research problem, research gaps. Now, you're not going to talk about every one of those in every chapter. Introduction, probably yes, but then maybe not research questions. Lit review, yes. Method would be all about connecting your methodology with the questions and the aims. So there will be in most of those chapters. So just really be very clear about which ones and what's the most important part of your common thread in every chapter, because you want that going through the entire document. It needs to be a complete whole. It can't be disjointed, right? But at the same time, each chapter also needs to stand alone. So this is the balance that you're doing. And this is one of the things that makes writing a thesis something that's very challenging and different to other writing that you will have done previously and you'll be doing in the future. So always think about your reader. And at this point, I want you to be thinking of your reader as the examiner, which we'll look at in a little while. So use this as much as you want, as little as you want, up to you now, of course, but it can be really helpful. I don't want you to put like that percentage completed. Don't panic if you think, oh my gosh, I actually have some chapters that, have a lot that I need to do to complete. You'll get there. And if you have this knowledge and this idea of where you're at and where you need to be, it'll help with your planning. Good. I'm glad the common thread is useful. That's excellent. All right, let's keep going. So number of words, always approximate, but will be helpful. Number 2 of our ways to connect your thesis chapters is tell your story. Your thesis isn't fiction, and I talk about this all of the time, but it still needs a beginning, a middle, and an end. By the time you get to your conclusion, your research project is ending. Give it an ending. Yes, we might need more research in the future, and that's fine, and that's actually a good thing. Research is never ending, but your project is ending. Give the examiners the conclusion and finish it off with a really very strong contribution and being very explicit about what your project has yielded for your field of study. Just like a novel or a movie, when characters are introduced, and for you, it's your stakeholders, your participants, your theory, your tools, your methods. What we wouldn't want to see in a movie is a character introduced or a book, and then we never see them again. We'd want an explanation. So it's very similar for this, right? If you're going to start talking about something in the introduction, it needs to be carried through the whole way. If you're going to mention something in the introduction or the lit review in those early chapters that you're not going to mention again in those later chapters, why would you have it now, right? So think about all of those things and think about those connections. So your chapters and your sections are stepping stones. You started knowing there was a problem. By the end, you've got some information and some evidence that's going to help to solve that problem. It might not completely solve it, that's okay, but it's giving some insight. So if one of your stepping stones is unstable, so a section or a chapter, and the reader's not quite sure what's happening, what happens to that poor lady? She falls in the river, doesn't she? And we don't want that. We want her skipping along with her shoes in her hands. Right, next thing, big picture strategies. This is looking at the coherence, looking at that connected whole. Keep that common thread clear in your mind. Write on a one page about all what your gaps, your significance, and put them up somewhere to keep you on track. On your bathroom mirror, maybe, on your fridge. Write your abstract is another really good strategy. It will help you as well. If you can, give little mini presentations to your supervisors. Have those big picture discussions about how your findings, discussion, and conclusion are all connecting. Go through your table of contents. Is everything clear in there? Does each section advance your argument? Because it needs to. You're advancing and leading the reader through. Go back and revise your introduction chapter when you're writing up your conclusion. They are mirrors. Okay, so that's a really good strategy as well. What's in your introduction should be in your conclusion and vice versa. Although obviously your introduction, you're saying, here's some questions, here's some aims. Your conclusion is saying, here's the answers to those questions and I've achieved my aims. I actually have a link here for this very good checklist, to be honest. It is just a checklist, but I think it's quite good. So check that resource out. Keep the reader in the loop. It's always about the reader. There's stepping stones, those chapters and sections. We need to keep the reader knowing where they're going, reminding them where they've been. It's a big document. So check the beginning paragraphs of every chapter. Do they remind the reader of the problem and the aims? Do they say, hey, this chapter is doing something important as part of my research project, and it's helping connect certain parts of my project, and also make sure that you state how the chapter is going to be structured so they know what to expect. No surprises in this thesis. Okay, you need to be explicit the whole way through. Strategy 5, include all the necessary information in each chapter. Now, we're going to work through each chapter, but quite quickly. You do have access to the slides, of course. And as we go through, try to jot some notes down if there's things that you think, oh, I don't know if I have that. Okay, and I've posed some questions for you as well. We need to go quick because we are always restricted for time in these sessions, but please go back and use the resources if you need to. All right, so title page and front matter. This is straight from those QUT requirements that you have the link for on HiQ. Don't make the title too long, make it interesting. Title page, you would probably know you need all that information. Front matter, do you need a list of illustrations, diagrams, figures, list of tables, abbreviations? Are you going to do a glossary of terms? Do you have publications? If you're doing thesis by publication, then you will need that. Acknowledgements and that statement of original authorship. This is all on QUT on HiQ, and you also have access to these slides, so I'll keep moving. Introduction and lit review. Ask yourself, in your introduction, is the relevance and significance of the research problem clearly explained, and have you got some evidence in there to justify it? Yes, in the lit review, you will expand, but you must engage the reader in that introduction chapter straight away and make sure that they know that this is a research problem that needs insight because it's having some kind of negative impact, okay? Obviously, you need to give an overview of the research design. Tell them what to expect, you know. You don't have to give all the ins and outs because that's what your methodology chapter is for, but you need to introduce those things. Lit review, you got a lot going on in the lit review. There's quite a few things in there. Who are the seminal researchers in your field? You will know who they are by now. Make sure you've included them, all right? Your examiners will look for that. So again, lots going on. I'm going to keep going though. Research design or methodology, whatever you're calling it. This is such an important chapter. They're all important, but this is the one that your examiner will really pull apart and look at quite critically to figure out and know exactly what you did and why. So all of those things there, have you clearly defined and explained the data collection tools and the data analysis methods? Have you talked about the limitations? All research has limitations, and that's fine, but we minimize them, don't we, as part of designing a robust research design? Make sure you've connected the research questions, the methodology. Why did you select those participants? Why have you got those data collection strategies? What about your role as the researcher? So there has to be enough detail that someone could take that chapter and implement your study themselves. And something that often happens in these methodology chapters is the data analysis strategy is sort of left a little bit. So make sure you're really clear on that. Findings and results. How are you going to present these findings and results? Make sure you have that clear, seek lots of feedback. Make sure the structure is really clear. Make sure you link back to your research questions and your methodology. Remind the reader how you collected and analyzed the data before you present those findings or results. Maybe a figure or a table would be helpful. Are you leading the reader and planting those seeds towards your implications? You do need to do that as well. Don't discuss, but start to allude and start to say, you know, this is what the participants are saying, and start to plant those seeds. Or if you don't have participants, obviously, this is what your experiments or whatever it might be. Make sure you give a summary. If you have too much raw data or too much evidence there that you want to include, maybe put some in an appendix. That could be a good strategy as well. Discussion and conclusion. That, again, that common thread. Your discussion chapter is a mirror of your lit review with the added bonus of all your amazing evidence that you have collected. Make sure your discussion answers your research questions or your hypotheses. And again, is that contribution, is it beginning to be made clear? Are you planting those seeds in the discussion that'll head to your implications? Conclusion mirrors the introduction. Have you got some recommendations directly related to the research problem? And also make sure you've got some future research directions, and potentially you'll put your limitations in the conclusion. You might have them only in the methodology. Double check what your supervisor wants. So a lot happening, isn't there? I know I've gone fast, but all of this information you've got access to after the session. Thinking about the connections between the chapters, I just mentioned a few of them. Here they are here again. Your lit review connects with the methods and the discussion. Methods and results are directly connected. Introduction and conclusion directly connected. So as well as your common thread all the way through, make sure you have these very clear connections between these chapters specifically. So if you have more questions, and I know I've gone through fairly fast, if you want to know more and you want to see some examples, I actually do a writing circle series where we look at every single one of your thesis chapters. Semester 1 is done. You can see all the resources on Blackboard, but semester 2 starts in August. So I repeat them all. So maybe you'd like to come to a few of those. We look at a lot of examples and exemplars and really delve deeply into each chapter. I've just put the link, by the way, for those writing sessions. Right, another strategy, as I keep saying, feedback, so important. Seek feedback as much as you can, not just from your supervisory team, but anybody who's willing and able. If you can have a feedback buddy with one of your peers, it's a win-win, right? Now, if you get the feedback and they're saying, your point's not clear, you haven't done your job as the writer. The reader is always right, I'm sorry to say. So fix it, reword, add a sentence, add an example. Maybe you need a table or a figure, but all of the feedback you receive will help you to make that document better and better and better. And at the end of the day, who's responsible for these improvements in your document? It's you. Right? So seek feedback, don't be afraid, put yourself out there, and I promise that the more feedback you get, the better your document will be. So remember my reflection example. Let's have a little look at that. Oh, sorry, that's gone. That shading's made it a little bit faded. But what I really want to do is remind you of this and just let you in on a few of my experiences that might help you as you progress through this final period. So I've highlighted the bit about my methods chapter. Oh, I was shattered. I really was. That she said, that's your worst chapter. I thought it was my best chapter. So let's have a little bit more. So this was my feedback from my first draft of the whole thesis. Okay, now I had obviously 2 supervisors. This is my mean supervisor. And this is the feedback. So chapter 2, avoid old literature, 1998, unnecessary. My theoretical framework was who I cited from 1998 because that's when it was developed and published, and it was still in use. People, I'm not the only one that used that theoretical framework. People still do today. So yeah, that was a bit annoying that she said that. But so what do? I just respond and said, oh, hey, that's my theoretical framework. I need to have that source. Your methods chapter needs much improvement. Sad face, definitely. This is my overall comment. Kerry, you write well. I did not find a single grammatical error. Okay, cool. Well, I'm a language and writing teacher, so yep, lucky for that. Thank you. But overall, you need to refine, you need structural adjustment to highlight the significance of the contributions your thesis is making. The story is there, but not explicit. Interesting, right? So good advice. Okay, so even though I had to breathe and I had to cry, I was okay in the end. Right, this is what else she said. Chapter 3, my bad chapter. You use convenience sampling. You didn't use random sampling. She was right. Yep. So convenience sampling is when you recruit respondents who are accessible and available. Okay. Random sampling is it's random people. So yeah, she was right about that. Few other questions there. Look, I had explained and justified, but not explicitly enough, right? So I hadn't written it clearly. She was right. I didn't have the good enough link between the research questions, research aims. I wasn't being clear enough about the site of the research. What was my analytical framework? Her suggestion was present a figure. Yep, did all of those things. Much, much better. So what's the moral of this story? Well, feedback you need. Your supervisors will see things that you don't see. Even though it was very upsetting that she hated my methods chapter, she was right, and I had worked hard and I had everything there, but I needed to be more clear. I needed more linking. She was very experienced. She was an examiner as well. And in the end, even though I thought some of her feedback was unfair and a little bit mean, at the end of the day, my thesis was excellent, partly because of that feedback. So keep in mind, rise above, discuss feedback that you're not sure about, feedback that you think you shouldn't have got, like for me about the fact that those sources were potentially a bit old. It's okay. Whatever. She didn't know, right? She'd forgotten or whatever. So, move on. All right. But yes, feedback is super important. Let's have a look at how you're demonstrating your contribution to your research field now. Rightio. Remember those QUT thesis requirements that we looked at? The first one was you need to make an original and or significant contribution to the field of research. And that is one of the main purposes as to why you're here at QUT. So even though, yes, this is one of the most important requirements, it's not a Nobel Prize. No one's expecting you to solve world peace. Your contribution can be small, but it will be beneficial for your stakeholders, okay? So it's super important for them. Maybe not everybody in the world, but your participants potentially and your stakeholders. So focus on them because they are important. Yep. Your reader is interested in what you're doing. Keep that interest going, engage them, and persuade the reader of the value of your research, and that's your contribution. Okay, write your drafts, think, seek feedback, redraft. You're learning, you're finding your way, you will get there. You will find those answers. The research problem is the key. Always come back to that. What's your problem? If there was a problem, because you wanted to then investigate it and get some insight. So make sure that's very clear from the beginning. And all the way through, you have this urgent and challenging problem, but your insights and findings will help improve that problem. It might not solve it, and that's okay, but the insight will help. So articulate the problem, be clear, persuade the reader about why they should care, make them care about this problem. They're interested in your field, remember? Okay, and then keep that common thread going. Again, engage and persuade. Why is the study relevant and for who? Connect your evidence and the literature from the literature and yours. Highlight the value. So right now, consider to yourself your exact research problem and why it's important. Write a few keywords and make sure you've got those keywords all the way through that narrative. So what is this original contribution? What counts? Well, you're going to have empirical evidence, yep, that you've collected, that you've analyzed, and then you've made into some conclusions, implications, and recommendations. So you'll think of it as another brick in the wall. It's another study adding to all of the previous studies. Maybe it's something to do with your methodology, because you've used a new methodology that other people in your field haven't been using. Now, that can't be the only contribution, but it can certainly be one of them. Maybe you've got a cross-disciplinary approach to an existing research area, maybe a new theoretical approach. Maybe those stakeholders, we don't have enough insight. So an example is in education. Sometimes we do a lot of research into what students' perceptions are, but not the teachers, or vice versa. So, you know, potentially your participants or your experiments that you're doing are looking at something that people in your field haven't necessarily delved into as deeply as you're going to do. Maybe you're going to inform some debates to help to clarify something. Is it theory, policy, practice, processes? So again, write in the chat or your notes, what is your contribution going to be? Even if you're not exactly sure, write some of those key problems, key words directly related to your research problem, right? You've got a problem, you've got a contribution, your thesis is all the stuff in the middle, yeah? So be really clear about the connections there. So part of this contribution is advancing your argument. Your argument is there is a problem, right? We know from previous studies all of this knowledge, but there's still knowledge gaps. And then why do we care about this problem? Because it's having a negative impact on someone or something. Make that very explicit. That's your value. Then as you go along, you've got your research design and you're again justifying and saying this is going to lead to evidence which will be valuable. Then once you've got that evidence and you've got your interpretations and conclusions, there is how you're contributing your knowledge. That's your value. And you can see if I move, it's a continuum. You're going backwards and forwards during this writing up period. So how do we achieve this explicit and articulating of your significant contribution? You need those critical discussions with your supervisors. What do you think is happening? How does it all connect? Am I being clear enough? Ask them. Data analysis, it's challenging. Take your time. Keep going backwards and forwards. Go back to the literature if you need to. Think of questions. Questions will be raised. Consider a range of answers. And don't discount anything. Think of the different perspectives of different stakeholders. That might help. The light bulbs will begin to turn on, and that will be really exciting. So you're engaging in a dialogue with the reader. I know I talk about this all the time. And what I do, because it is so important, the reader is so important, of course. Keep moving backwards and forwards between the chapters to see how your presentation of your findings is going. Look at any problems from a different perspective. And as we keep saying, seek feedback. All right, let's look at examiners. We're actually not doing too bad for time. Let's look at the examiners. They're the most important readers at this point, aren't they? Keep filling out your reflection document, keep filling out your writing audit as we go through. Right, in your peer discussion, you talked about key elements that you think examiners will look for in your thesis. Do you want to pop anything in the chat that you came up with? I hope that you came up with some good ideas. So who are your examiners? Remember, we looked at that examination process. Your supervisory team, they nominate 2 examiners prior to the lodgement. One will be an international academic, one will be in Australia. Your examiners won't know who you are, you won't know who they are. They are experts in your field. Don't be intimidated or worried about that. It is a good thing, okay? Because they're interested. They want to know what you found. They want to know all about your research. They're not experts in your study. We need to be explicit and clear the whole time. We need to keep their interest engaged. So what do examiners do? There has been a little bit of research around this. I've talked about this in some of our other workshops and writing circles. It is a high stakes process. It can seem invisible. So that's why the researchers have done a bit of investigating. What they've found, the importance of first impressions, how the examiners judge the quality of a thesis, how they work through a thesis, and what annoys them. So we're going to look at each of those points. But good news is they begin the examination process feeling really confident and looking forward to reading about your study and feeling like, okay, you know, this is a thesis that will pass. All right, so that's good news. So its first impressions are so important, you know, really like for a lot of things, isn't it? First impressions are always important. They do judge a thesis very quickly, so it must read well from that beginning page. And that's why you would have noticed a couple of slides ago, I said regarding your research problem, make sure it's very clear on that very first page. Do not have your examiner read past pages 1 and 2 and still not really know what you're doing, right? They need to know that from the first few words, okay? So make sure you're very explicit in those first few pages. You can't tell them everything, I know, but you can give them a really broad overview because they decide early on whether this is going to be hard work or is it going to be enjoyable to read. We want it to be enjoyable, don't we? So if those initial chapters are unclear, they're going to be a lot more critical when they read the rest of the thesis. And they usually form those first impressions by the end of the lit review, maybe even sooner. So those first 2 chapters. Now, if they read those first 2 chapters and they're not feeling quite all that good, you can reverse those first impressions, but it is hard. So let's not go down that road. Let's make sure those first 2 chapters are excellent. So how do we get those first good impressions? Don't leave introduction and lit review till the very end. I know you wrote them for your proposal, but you of course need to revise them and spend a lot of time on those first 2 chapters to make sure that they are awesome. Spend time on the abstract as well. Proofread really carefully, including checking your reference list. They might start by looking at the reference list, firstly to see if the seminal authors are there and maybe to see if they are there themselves. So if they look at your reference list and there's errors in there, not going to be a good impression. Check your table of contents. Your subheading should tell a good story as well. That's one of the first things they'll look at too. Think about what you do when you look through a textbook or, you know, or a journal article or a website. What keeps you interested? You need to hook them in and you need to keep their engagement. How do they judge the quality of a thesis? Well, your thesis is demonstrating your expertise to undergo a research project and your ability to find something significant to give insight into a research problem. So You need to show them that the research problem is significant and needs insight. They want evidence that you've done a very comprehensive review of the literature in the field and that you have understood it. So you're demonstrating in the lit review your understanding of the field and the issues under investigation. Evidence that the findings are valuable as well. So that's your common thread going all the way through. So they're reading and they're seeing, there's a problem. Yep, I can see how this research fits into the scholarly conversation at this stage. They can see your methodology is robust and it is going to yield some empirical evidence that will be credible. And, they want to see that common thread and they want to see the evidence supporting your implications and findings. Because you will have that one international examiner, you really need to be clear about the research setting. Don't assume everyone knows where Brisbane is or things about Australia or whatever. If your research setting is in another country, make no assumptions. Give all the information that anyone would need to understand the research context. So how do you achieve this quality thesis? Make it reader friendly. It's about the readability, but also the quality of your evidence, of course, and demonstrating your expertise in your field. All those key themes for the session, that's how you make it and achieve that quality. Write those messy drafts, seek feedback and improve them. Problem solve when the structure's not working. Have those discussions with your supervisors and you will work it out so that it is the best it can be. So when examiners are working through a thesis, the research participants in the studies that have looked at examiners, they will often read it from cover to cover just to see what's going on. Then they'll read it again much more critically, and that's when they pick up their pen and start to make comments. Or some of them said, well, I read their abstract, the introduction and the conclusion and the table of contents, then I go back in and read the rest. Some of them work from the beginning to the end 2 or 3 times. Some of them look at the first and the last chapters. Some of them look at the reference list first. So we actually don't know, but they will look at those first chapters and they will look at the end chapters, table of contents, abstract, reference list. Okay, so we need to make all of those chapters not only connect as a whole, but stand alone. So that's why you need those beginning paragraphs in every chapter just to remind the reader, hey, this is the research aim, this is the problem, this is what this chapter is going to do. Okay, so you've got those 2 things happening. Yes, a coherent whole, but the chapters also need to stand alone because the examiner might go and start with the conclusion. Okay, so we need them to have that really good overview at the beginning of the conclusion and every chapter. So we're going to help the examiners work through no matter what they want to do. It's completely up to them. We can't guess. So let's help them to skip around if that's what they want to do. As I said before, a good strategy is print out your table of contents and see how that flows. Make sure you've got those beginning paragraphs. Make sure you've got those seminal authors. Right, what annoys examiners? Pretty obvious, really. We don't want them to get to the end of your thesis and not really know what you did. That's fairly clear. They don't like a poor lit review. Super important that your lit review is excellent. They need to have a clear justification for the research design and every part of it. So make sure you do that. Justify everything. We don't want the findings to be hard to follow or boring, which is why you plant those seeds. Come to the writing circle on writing your research results. And we've got lots of examples about planting those seeds. Make sure your conclusions match the findings. Obviously, the presentation is really important. So if they're reading your thesis and if there's errors, there's typos, the formatting isn't correct, what do you think the examiner is going to think about your ability as a researcher? they're going to think, well, maybe this person doesn't have attention to detail in their research as well as their writing. So that's 100%, we do not want that. So the presentation needs to be fantastic. Referencing conventions need to be accurate and consistent as well. So spend that time proofreading, really, really important. So when it's time to submit, you're going to have the best document that you can, but you will need to sometimes submit it. Okay, now, as long as you've done your best, which I know that you will, and it looks really good, the presentation is good, you've got your common thread all the way through, you've addressed everything each chapter needs, we can't guess what the examiners will think. So as long as the structure and presentation are leading them through in a clear way, you're potentially agonizing about something that they won't even notice. So at some point, once your supervisory team and yourself, I think you've got the best document, let it go. You're going to get feedback anyway, and then they'll suggest some further improvements. All right, we are up to our final tips. And we're running pretty well for time, which is great. So how did you go with the session activities? You had the reflection, we had the writing audit, we had some questions that I posed to you throughout the session. Please keep thinking about those activities and questions. You know, I know that we are restricted for time. I give as much time as I can, but you know, you have the resources there. And look, if you've got any questions, please let me know, and I'll do my best to help you. So some final tips, proofreading skills, really important, isn't it? We need you to make sure you have that great presentation, no typos, everything is clear. So schedule proofreading time into your calendar. Proofreading is not writing. Separate the two out. Best practice for proofreading is print and read aloud. Attention to detail is key. Take your time. We have two levels in your writing. We have the macro level, which is your coherence, the big picture. We have the micro level, which is your grammar, your sentence structure, and the flow of each paragraph, making sure it's explicit and that you have a good topic sentence. It's very hard to proofread both of these things at the same time. My recommendation is divide it out. Sometimes look at your paragraphs, sometimes you'll be looking at the bigger picture and those connections and your common thread all the way through. We do have a proofreading writing circle coming up where I really delve more deeply and we do some practice of this idea of the macro and the micro level. So if you can come to that, that would be good. Research writing conventions, as we said, that's something your examiners will be looking for. I know referencing style is boring and annoying, but it's part of being a researcher is adhering to those conventions. Manually check your reference lists. I'm sorry to say, and whether you're using the software or not, you probably are, but your software is only as good as your data entry. If you've made errors in the data entry, there'll be errors in your reference list. So we want the reference list to be accurate. Make sure you've set up your long Word document, your formatting of your subheadings, margins, page numbers, all of those sorts of things. Again, something that you need to be good at as a researcher. I'm just going to pop into the just putting in the link for your formatting. No one can do this for you. You need to learn how to do it, okay? And it can take a little while, but once you've got it, make sure you submit all your documents to your supervisors in the correct long Word document formatting. If you're not sure what I mean, go into that link and it'll tell you. Someone has asked a question about writing their thesis as a publication and potentially having to go back to the monograph. Do I need to change the formatting? So the formatting I mean is a long document. So whether you're a monograph or by publication, you have a document, it needs to be formatted as a long Word document with the page breaks, figures and tables labeled correctly, and all the page set up. Are you going to get a proofreader or an editor? You and your supervisory team might decide to do that, to engage a professional. Now, a proofreader will correct surface errors. They won't look deeply into it. An editor will look on the writing quality and the clearer expression, and probably give a lot more feedback, but also potentially be more expensive. When are you going to do this? Before final seminar for your PhD, before your seminar for MPhil, before external examination. Have that discussion with your supervisors. There is information on the HiQ research pages in that your candidature section, you can see there. Word of mouth recommendations are probably going to be the best for you. Ask your supervisors, ask your peers. Don't use someone that you haven't had recommended to you. I do hear some not so nice stories because it does cost a lot of money, and sometimes people haven't been happy with the level of quality of the proofreading or the editing. So word of mouth is really important, and always ask for a quote as well. They should be able to quote you based on the number of words or the number of pages. Do you know your liaison library? This is an interesting one because what I am finding whenever I talk about liaison librarians, lots of times HDRs don't know what I'm talking about. There's a link there to find your liaison librarian. So any questions that you have regarding referencing software, publication metrics, data management, resources that you might need to update your, add to your lit review, ask them. They're there for you. They're within your faculty. Usually librarians are lovely. So make sure you know that person. Now, they won't format your document for you. Okay, so don't ask them to do that, but they could potentially help you with some resources if the resources that are on HiQ aren't quite working for you. They can certainly make suggestions. Now, don't leave it to the last minute either. Don't contact your liaison librarian and a week before you submit for external examination. All right. If you think there's something a librarian could help you with, contact them as soon as you can. Manchester Phrase Bank is always very, very helpful. Now you can see there, there's all different parts of a document that there's recommendations around. Just when you need some starting phrases, when you're a little bit stuck, pop in there and I'm sure you'll find a whole lot of good information. All right, so as we're nearing the end now, let's think back to those key themes to keep in your mind during this writing up time, this last part of your candidature. Stay motivated, keep up your confidence. You can do this. Remember your passion for the research topic and let that passion into your document. Have your reader, your examiner be passionate as well by showing your passion. Don't shut out your friends and your family. I know that it's not good when you run into someone or you talk to someone in your family and they say, oh, haven't you finished that yet? Don't let that get you down. They don't understand. Help them to understand, and say to them, hey, guess what? It's going fine, but actually you could help me by taking the kids out for half a day so I can do some proofreading, or you can help by cooking my dinner, whatever it might be. People who aren't in your situation don't always understand what you're going through, the pressure. Enlist some help is what I'm saying. And also please take time out and recharge. I know that you think I need to be writing every minute of the day, but by having a little break and being kind to yourself, you'll be much more productive. take control of the writing process, look back at that reflection activity. Hopefully you've written a few things in there. Keep writing those drafts, thinking the answers will come. If you're struggling with something, tell your supervisors, they'll be able to help you. Seek feedback widely and regularly and be informed. So keep those key themes in your mind and, try to make this period, which can be stressful, make it as less stressful as you can, because you will get there and the rewards in the end will be amazing. Once you send that up for external examination, you'll get to rest for a bit. It'll come back, maybe some changes to make. That's okay. You'll be able to address those, and before you know it, you'll be all done. So at some point, you're going to have to let go. It is going to have to happen. It will be a joint decision between you and your supervisory team. You've made the document as good as you can. Be proud of it. Don't agonize about what the examiners are going to think. We can't guess, right? And if you've done your best job, your supervisors are happy. So let's send it off into the examiner's hands and wait and see what they say. They're going to be supportive. Yes, they might ask you to make some changes, but to make the document better. So once you've pressed that submit button, celebrate, rest up. What's going to happen next? Okay, so that was a lot. I know what you should know by now, that our workshops and writing circles are always packed full, which is why you have access to the resources. So you can go back over them if you need to. I'm always here. You can ask me questions. I am going on leave for 2 weeks, actually. So I won't answer your questions then. However, when I come back, I will. Okay, there's the survey link. You've got the QR code there. If you wouldn't mind. So I know I talk a lot about feedback. I know I talk about a lot of connecting with your peers. Here's a way that you can do both with our HDR peer feedback sessions. They're not scary. Everybody in the sessions is kind and supportive. We lead you through that whole process of seeking and giving and receiving feedback. It will help you in so many ways. It will increase your writing skills, improve the readability of your document, and improve your feedback literacy. So please come along. You can see the next one is on the 19th of July. I have 2 to 3 per month. If I have more people coming and saying we want more, I will put more on. If you want more examples, proofreading your writing Wednesday, 20 July, Wednesday, 3rd of August, dealing with writer's block. That's a really good one. Lots of tips on how to improve your productivity. And as I said before, we've got our second semester writing circle starting in August. I've just popped the HiQ link in to register. Now, all the semester 1 writing event resources are on Blackboard. So you can, of course, go into Blackboard and look at those. And let me just also, don't forget that today's resources, the slides and the recording will go up later. Okay, so that will get you into Blackboard, that link. All right, we are nearly done. So takeaways for today: make your thesis interesting, persuasive, and readable, and the value clear. And then your examiners will be happy. Yes, some tweaks here and there, but it just makes it a good read for them. Seek feedback widely and regularly, and take time out. Refresh your mind and your body. We do have this module coming up as well that you may be interested in if you are wanting to write a journal article. It starts Monday, 18th of July. Now, you will have to invest quite a bit of time, at least 5 to 10 hours a week, right? That journal article doesn't write itself. So think about if you have that time available at this stage. And if you think you do, then enroll. Industry mentoring. This is really good. You guys are coming to the end of your candidature, so you need to start thinking about your career. IMNIS is about STEM. So there's a lot of industry mentoring opportunities there. If you're in STEM, have a look at that. What's on soon? Career competitive job applications. So that's on Monday. Self-sourcing and HDR internship on Wednesday. There's a careers Q&A the following Wednesday. So some really good things there around your careers. If you want to have a look at those, I would highly recommend. 3-minute thesis competition. You've just got a couple more days to enroll for that. Another really good way to help you to get the value of your research clear and out there as well. Would really recommend that. So if you haven't registered and you want to, please do. There's also the Visualize Your Thesis. It's a 1-minute digital short video. There's prize money for these too. So as you know, everything's on Blackboard, everything's on HiQ. You get that HDR Matters email to you every Monday with what's coming up. Make sure you read those. Okay, so there we go. Writing up your thesis. A lot to think about, isn't it? I know that there is, but I hope that you've been able to write down some notes. If you have any questions, please ask me now. There's still a few of you here. Pop something into the chat if you'd like to, or turn on your mic. I'm sure someone does have some questions. What do you think? Anybody? All right, we do have a question. Is a lit review section structured differently for thesis of monograph versus publication? Good question. No real answer, to be honest. What I would say about the lit review is it is probably one of the chapters that is the most different between every thesis, because you're all coming from different research fields. You're going to have completely different subheadings as you work through. You know, in the introduction and methodology, a lot of the subheadings are quite similar, aren't they? Whereas for the lit review, that's going to be completely dependent on your research topic and your research field. So in terms of a monograph and a publication or thesis by publication, I would say no, there wouldn't be too much difference. One thing that might be, though, a lot of people, when they do a thesis by publication, they actually do a systematic lit review and publish that as one of their publications. So if that was the case for you, you would include that systematic lit review in your thesis. But I would imagine, though, as well, you would need some kind of companion chapter as well, because if you think about a journal article, it's quite short, isn't it, compared to a thesis? However, maybe you don't. Maybe you would just need potentially an introductory section. Then you have your systematic lit review that you published, and then you might have a summary section there as well. So that would probably be the main difference, although remembering thesis by monograph, you could still be doing a systematic lit review. So that difference would be purely because a journal article is often quite short compared to a thesis, but maybe your thesis, maybe a systematic lit review, if you publish one, it could be around 8,000 words. That sounds fairly good. It sounds like a good length, doesn't it? But I would certainly be wanting to put an introductory section and a summary section to just bookend that publication. So I hope that that makes sense. As I said, the lit review would probably be one of the chapters that are most different among everybody's document. So again, best advice is feedback. And with your supervisors or anyone you ask feedback from, be specific. And if with your lit review, you know, obviously you want those main points to be really clear, but think about the structure. You know, are you scaffolding the reader? And so ask the people giving you feedback, and is it leading you through in a clear enough way? Or, you know, do I need to potentially restructure a little bit? I've told this story before. One of my friends, when I was studying, literally a week before she submitted, she flipped her literature review on its head. The thing she had at the bottom, she put at the beginning. She completely restructured it. There was no comments from the examiner to say that there was any issues, and so probably she did the right thing. But it was just based on some supervisory feedback that she received, and she thought, it's not working, I'm just going to flip it on its head. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to do that, but these things happen. Yeah. You have to be flexible and you know, really seek that feedback, because the readers are not wrong, right? If they're confused, it means that the readability isn't where it needs to be. Okay. Anybody else got a question? Okay, so that's all of our questions, and thank you everyone for attending, and I will see you all again soon.